Would you like the page numbering on your slides to update automatically and to have the location of the footer and the date update based on the slide layout? If yes, in this video, I'm going to show you how. PowerPoint has a useful feature that many people are not using properly, and that is the header and the footer option. Now, with the header and footer option, you can access that from the ribbon, or you can click on the Insert Header and Footer, and you'll get the same pop-up menu. Now, this pop-up menu gives you different options that you can choose. You can decide if you want your presentation to have a date and a time. So if you check it, it means that it does have a date and a time, and it gives you two options. You can choose to do that update automatically. Now, automatically would be if you wanted your date and the time to update every time you open the presentation. And you have the option to choose from the year only, the time, dates. So you have all of these different formats. And every time you open the file, it's going to show the current time and date. But if you don't want that, you want it to be fixed, then click on the fixed, and then you get to type here whatever you want. And whatever you type will end up showing on your slides. Next option is the slide number. So in some cases, you might want to show the slide number as is with this particular presentation. The slide number in this case is important because this kind of presentation is used for internal documents or could be used for a style guide or anything that needs to reference a specific page number. So this is the option where you get to hide it or show it, and all you have to say is apply. Now, if you say apply, it only applies to one slide, whereas if you say apply all, then it'll apply to the rest of the presentation. Now, something else with the page numbering is you have different options. You can start at 0. Now, 0 would mean that the title slide is 0, does not have a number, and the second slide will be your number 1 slide. Or maybe you want to start your presentation at another number. Maybe you already have another presentation and now you want to print them out and combine the two, and you don't want to mess up the page numbering, so that's where you might just probably change it to whatever the next slide is on the previous presentation, and then once you print them out, they're going to look like they were created together. In this case, I'm going to go back to number 1. Now, with the footer, you also have the option to hide or show, and then you can type here whatever you want. Whatever you type here will end up showing as the footer. Now, this is usually used for the copyright notice or some legal disclaimers. It's not meant for long sentences, and it's meant for something that you might want on all slides. So if you have different footers for different slides, it could get complex. I would recommend you type them manually, but if you have something that you want to show automatically on all the slides, then this would be a good option for you. So I'm going to click apply, and now you can see why they are showing in this presentation. Now, the big question is, other than the hide and the show, how do we control the location? Because notice in this particular case, the date is showing almost in the middle, but when I switch location on the presentation slide, now the date is on the right and the footer has shifted. So how do we get to do that? Well, we do that from the back end of the presentation. I'll have to go into the View, Master, Slide Master. The Slide Master controls your theme of the presentation, and the theme, that's where you get to choose your colors, your fonts, the background color, and you get to customize how the different layouts look like, starting with the top slide. Now, the top slide is called the master slide. Some people call it the parent slide. That's because whatever you do to this particular slide is going to impact the rest of the slides below it, the children. So you'll notice here that in this particular case, I have customized the sidebar, and I have changed the location of the page numbering, because by default, anytime you start a new presentation, let me just show you here, I'm going to start a new presentation. This is what they would usually look like. And if you go into the View, Master, Slide Master, by default, you have these 5 elements on any slide that you start with PowerPoint, because these 5 elements control what is known as the master layout. So they have the title, the date, the footer, the page numbering, the text. So for example, if you don't want to show the date, you can hide it, and now the date will disappear. I highly recommend you don't do that, because sometimes people are merging presentations. So if you're creating a generic presentation, keep all the elements in place. But if you're 100% sure that you will never ever need the date on your presentation, then you can go ahead and deactivate it from here. And then you can get to change the location of where you want the footer to be, and this is where you get to change the color, whether it's left, right, or center. You can change the location of the page number and make some adjustments. And whatever you adjust here, notice how the adjustments now are done on the other slides. Now, at the same time, you're going to notice that we've created a disconnect because we've got this date here that is now disconnecting from this slide because the children have noticed that there's an important element that is missing. And that's why, even though this option is available, I highly recommend you don't do that. So I'm going to click here and revert and go back and put everything back in place because I don't want to create any bugs in the presentation. So notice here what's going to happen. So to fix that, I'm going to say hide and show, and now I know that whatever I have done here is going to be related to the presentation. Now notice everything here got messed up, so that's why I recommend never touch these things, never delete them, but do change the location of where they are and the colors. So let me show you some examples of how you can customize this for different scenarios and some of the elements that could impact how they might appear on the front end. So let's start with the example you've already seen here. Now, in this particular case, everything is normal and specific because I've set the page number to the side. I flipped it around to 90 degrees so that it is sideways, and everything has its own place. The only options that I have to make changes to is when I'm working on a darker slide. Now, on a darker slide, I have to choose a different font color. So, for example, if I click here on the footer and show again, it might not be, there might not be enough contrast. So, in that particular case, you might want to click and change the font color. So rather than going this dark, I might want on the darker slide to go a little bit lighter. So I am using some manual formatting on the subsequent children slides. Something else that might need adjustments as well, if you go to the other color slides. So if you have colored slides with a background, try to pick a color for the footer that has enough contrast. And the same thing when we have a full image slide. In this particular template, the other adjustments were made on slides that have images. Notice how I've changed the date around, and in this case I've changed the footer. I moved it slightly around. So if I reset, just so that you see what changed, and go back to the default, you'll see that the footer will be overlapping with the picture, and I don't want that to happen. So you can just do that on some of these slides. And now this is how it's working in this template. Let me show you a couple more examples that could inspire you when you're creating footers. So we're going to go to this particular template now. Notice how in this case we've got the date is in a position where it's not interfering with the cover slide design, whereas on the subsequent slides it is using the default that I have in the layout. And then I've also created different ones for the image placeholders. Notice how the date has shifted and the slide number, and then in this case the footer has shifted. And once again, all of this is customized on the back end. So you can go here, choose where you want everything to be, and then as you're working on each slide, you can start making these adjustments. Because notice if I click and revert, the date is going to be over the design, and I don't want that. So this is where you could just come in here and make some, let's just do that here, make some customization. So that is another example. Now here's a third example, because it could show you something that you might face if you're using full images. Now in this particular case, I've created a stylized circle to anchor the page number, and I made the page number colored. And to do that, I went as well to the back end. Notice how on the top slide, I've got this semicircle here with the color, and I've colorized the page number. Now everything works fine. There's no issues until I get to the darker slides. Now with the darker slides, I had to create a manual option and add a white box, because if I don't, and I move this around, notice I won't be able to see that color. So let me just revert. And so what I did is I copied the semicircle from here. You can just copy it and take it to the slide that is darker and add it. Now, if you're using an SVG or a graphic from Microsoft, it's going to work. If you're using an image, it's not going to work. So I'm going to say edit, paste, and notice now it's this color, but I don't want it to be this color. I'm going to go here and say white. And now by saying white, I've got an alternate version. Now, this option is going to work very well if I am on a simple dark layout, but it's not going to work when I have an image placeholder, because notice this is an image placeholder and this is a full color. Let me show you the difference on the front end. So if I go to the front end of the presentation and we go to one where we have a full color, notice that the white box here is showing and there's no manual formatting. This is the actual part of the design. However, when I get to the slide that has the full image, this white feature is not showing. That's because the image is on top of the icon, and that's something that I can't understand why PowerPoint has that. It always puts the image on top of any graphic you have on the slide. So even if I say reset, nothing is showing, and I can see here the white box, it's still there, but because the image is always on top, I'm not able to see that. So in this particular case, let me just revert the formatting, because what I did is I did actually move some of the text around here. I'm just going to revert. Now, there are two different ways where you can fix this scenario. Option 1 requires manual formatting, which means that you would go back into the View Slide Master, copy this white icon, and then bring it over and then paste it on top of your slide manually. So if I say here now, Edit Paste, I'm going to get that white icon in place. But this feature could create some issues because now people could start clicking on that icon and it's going to move around. So let me show you another way that you can do this, where you can get that little cropped item by going back into the Slide Master. So I'm going to go into View Master, Slide Master, and now we're going to go to the image placeholder. So before making this as an image placeholder, I can crop out this part, and then that way the image placeholder will have a hole in this particular area, and then on the front end it'll always look consistent. So the first thing I need to do is I need to delete the image placeholder. The next thing, I need to delete that white option before I use it. So I'm just going to click Control X, and now I've got this red box. So instead of the red box, I'm going to right click on the background and say Format Background, and I'm going to say Hide Background. Now notice when I say Hide Background, this icon is hiding. That's because this option is telling Microsoft to hide whatever I have done designed to the parent slide. So I think in our particular case, I'm going to say Hide Background, so that way we always have that white element in place. And then I'm going to go back to the slide here, and I'm going to create an image placeholder. So I'm going to first of all click on the box here, create a box, and I'm going to send it to the back so I can see where it's looking at. And then I'm going to go get the white icon from the slide above. So I'm going to copy this and put it right on top of this box. Now I'm going to select both. So I'm going to click Shift and click with the mouse on both of them. So I've got the white icon and the red box selected. Next thing, I'm going to go click on Shape, and then I'm going to click here and choose a Fragment. Now sometimes with the fragment you might end up getting two pieces. So let's see what's ended up happening here. So if I recolor this box, okay, notice how now I have a box colored, but we have minus this section. So sometimes the fragment, when it's on the corner, it ends up chopping out the feature, whereas if the fragment is in the center, just so you can see why sometimes it could be inconsistent. So for example, if I say now fragment this way, we've got two items in place, whereas when it's on the corner, PowerPoint tends to take out a piece, and that's what we want anyway. So we want to have this colored option, and we want the white background gone. And now that I have this shape with the cropped out corner, now I can turn it into an image placeholder. So while I'm in the Slide Master, I'm going to click on Insert Placeholder, and I'm going to go to Picture, and I'm going to draw a full picture outline. Next, I'm going to send the picture to the background. So I'm going to right click on the picture frame and say Send to Back. And I'm going to use the Shift key and click and select the box and the image placeholder. And once again here, I'm going to say Intersect. So once I've done that, now I have an image placeholder you can see here on the corner with a cropped out side. Now most people are not going to be able to see this image placeholder, so that's why I'm going to recolor it. So I'm going to go into Format and give it a pattern so that we're able to see what that image placeholder looks like, so someone on the front end can see it. So I'm going to make the image placeholder darker. so people are able to see it. And then I'm going to add some instructions here that I always like to add as image for the image placeholders, so people know how to use that on the front end. And I'll make sure that the text is visible. So let me take that out of the way so you can see how this is all done. And now we have the image placeholder. We've got the chopped out corner and everything. So let's see how that's going to show up on the front end. So now if I go into the view normal and go to the front end, we can see the image placeholder in action. Now we have this segment taken out no matter what picture you choose. So even if I delete this picture and I bring in something else, so for example, if we bring in this particular picture and I then send it to the back, notice how now the footer is always working and we have this white accent in place. Now, of course, you would probably want to reset the custom graphics depending on the picture where it is, or you might want to crop the picture and change the locations. But the issue is that we have fixed this particular footer here, and now it is going to be working on the image, and no one will be able to click and move it around. Everything is going to have its own place. Congratulations, now you know how to work with headers and footers better than most people do. Till next time, ciao for now.